Hi, you guys. Welcome to part three of chapter 16, which is over the Gilded Age. So, we were just speaking on Wounded Knee, and the last thing that you heard me say is that Wounded Knee really put a pin in our history. It ended 4 centuries of armed conflict between Native Americans who are fighting white encroachment and white settlers and their descendants. So now we'll move on, or move forward, dare I say. We'll move forward to talking about some of the politics of the Gilded Age, because that's another one of the reasons why it's called the Gilded Age, meaning, you remember, gilded meaning it's great on the outside, but when you break that bad boy open, it is rotten to the core. So let's talk about some of the politics. So, in the Gilded Age, it's known for being just rife. Okay, just rife with political corruption. A lot of urban, and by urban we mean like big city politics, are really under the sway of these corrupt and moneyed political machines. A lot of national lawmakers, instead of supporting bills that will necessarily, help the people, they're in the practice of supporting bills that aided companies that they had invested in. So I always like to bring this back to the forefront of your minds that we vote people into office and it's their job to serve us. And during this time, they're not serving the people, they are filling their place and serving themselves. So instead of supporting bills that will help or eventually aid their constituents, a lot of national politicians will and national lawmakers will support bills that will help companies that they had a financial investment in. An example of some of this happens during President Grant's tenure in office. So, under Grant, we have the Credit Mobilier scandal. And with the Credit Mobilier scandal, a corporation was formed by an inner ring of Union Pacific Railroad stockholders. They formed this inner ring to oversee government assisted construction. And so, what it did is that it enabled these people to essentially sign contracts with themselves, and they would set the profit. So, they would get tremendous profit. So, again, to help you understand this, a corporation was formed by Union Pacific Railroad stockholders to oversee government assisted construction of railroads. So essentially, these people formed a corporation to they formed essentially their own corporation, thus allowing them to sign contracts with themselves. And they made a lot of money from it. Now, what is aiding this political corruption? Because again, it's politics is known for its immense corruption at this time. So, what is aiding this corruption? Well, one, there has been there's been a tremendous economic growth at this time. And the political structure that we have really isn't, or that we have at this time, can't handle a lot of the problems that are due to this tremendous growth of the economy. And you have people who are controlling the economy. You have people like JP Morgan, this banker on Wall Street with lots of speculation, who are controlling the stock market, which is just one part of the economy. Also, at this time, the political structure doesn't really or can't really handle the problems of the growing economy, because at this time we still have what we would consider small federal government. So all like medical care, education, business regulation, none of that was handled federally. That was all under local and state control. So you don't really have a government entity to oversee this national, economy here. And so there's just, I would say, it's unbalanced. It's really unbalanced. We have small national government that's not regulating business. They're not regulating the economy. They're not regulating education or medical care. All of that is seen as being um, under the purview of state and local governments. There is a bit of legislation that will come down the pipe that will kind of aid in overseeing some business regulation. So, for example, in 1883, the Civil Service Act is passed, which created a merit based system for federal and government appointments, for federal and government employees. So, in order to be promoted or to be placed in a particular job, you can't just be put in the job. You have to have some type of examination to show that you are able to do that job. We also, in the 1880s and 1887, have the creation of the Interstate Commerce Commission, or the ICC. The ICC was established by Congress to ensure that the rates that railroads charged farmers and merchants were reasonable and fair. So railroads cannot charge exorbitant amounts of money to transport goods to market. So they were created, the ICC is created to really make sure that railroads are charging fair prices to farmers and merchants to get their products to market. And in 1890, we have the creation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. And it's this that will get John D. Rockefeller. The Sherman Antitrust Act banned all practices that would restrain free trade. So remember in part two, I think it was part two, maybe it was part one, where I was saying Rockefeller would simply buy out rival refineries, that will be found to be in violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. You cannot just buy people out to keep them from competing with you. It's seen as being unfair, and it restrains free trade. It keeps you from having any type of competition in the market. All right, so social Darwinism in America. We already talked a bit about that, but social Darwinism is really, I'll say it again just in brief, was really something that was created by Herbert Spencer, who looked to Charles Darwin's uh, theory of evolution, of biological evolution, and he applies it to society and says that those who are fit, he coins the term survival of the fittest, meaning that those who are fit are the ones who are going to survive and thrive. So if you didn't survive, if you were not able to thrive in this market, it was your own fault for not working hard enough. So it definitely views the poor, or puts the poor in a position of being responsible for their own fate, while justifying immense wealth and the success of a lot of these barons who own these industries, who own these corporations. So that is social Darwinism. It's also during this period that, because of uh, we're living at a time in the Gilded Age where workers don't have any protections, and it's incredibly dangerous. So much so that, again, 35,000 workers are dying every year in workplace accidents, and there is no social safety net. There's nothing you can do. We get a wave of labor organizing in the 1880s. So we'll get a number of people who will start to organize workers to try to get more rights as workers. The Knights of Labor was the first group to try to organize unskilled and skilled workers together, men and women, blacks and whites, and it was the largest labor organization in the 19th century, because at this time they feel that ordinary Americans had lost control of their economic livelihoods, that they weren't able to survive at this time. They really felt that this extreme wealth And this extreme poverty that we had in America was really threatening democratic government. And this wave will really, I will say, it'll take off. We're at a time where we see increased, or I would say an expanded democracy. We have a lot of people who vote. As soon as people gain, as soon as people gain citizenship, they're voting. Now, remember also during this time, African Americans are still voting, but in smaller numbers because again, we've not had the great migration yet. So the majority of African Americans at this time live in the South, and they are under really the control of former Confederates. So there is definitely, I would say, some shrinkage in African American political participation. But there is a fear there, a lot of people are beginning to fear one class warfare and just this idea that no one should have to be in poverty in America. And a lot of people will write books at this time on the unequal distribution of wealth. Lawrence Grunland will write a book called The Cooperative Commonwealth. We'll also have Edward Bellamy, who will write a book called Looking Backward. But there's another book that becomes a bestseller that's written in 1879 by Henry George, and that's called Progress and Poverty. And he really felt that this extreme wealth had driven a wedge in society. And he believed that poverty, or really in this book, says that if you're in poverty, it's not a result of your own failures. So he's going against this principle of social Darwinism that a number of people, including Andrew Carnegie, had kind of adopted for themselves, right? He says that if you're poor or if you're in poverty, it's not because of your own failures. It's because of how we've organized our economy. So you being in persistent poverty is a result of how we've organized this economy. And that no one, with the tremendous amount of wealth that we have in this nation, no one should be poor in America. No one should be struggling, quote, for a pitiful living. And so he would really call for public ownership of some of these large entities, such as mass transit and such. But this book will be really popular. It will propel Henry George into political participation. It will be a bestseller. Um, and the last thing I will discuss during the Gilded Age is the Haymarket Square riot. I also put a video in your module about the Haymarket Square riot, which really begins in early 1886. Remember, by the 1880s, there's a lot of labor unrest because we don't have widespread unions or union participation. Workers, there is no minimum wage. So workers have demanded some rights and a wage increase. And, if we are part of this corporation as workers, treat us as part of this corporation. And on May 3rd, 1886, four strikers are killed by the police, and a rally was held in Haymarket Square the next day. So the next day, May 4th, 1886, a bomb is thrown into the crowd by an unknown assailant, and it kills civilians as well as policemen. And after the bomb is thrown, police just open fire. 8 men are charged for their participation and convicted of a crime that they more than likely did not commit. So this really, I use this as an example because it just gives a pretty good example of the labor unrest that will continue to plague society into the 20th century when we start to talk about the populism in the People's Party. So I will see you guys next week. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. And again, if you have any questions, questions, I'll include them in the lecture. There's no such thing as a bad question. And remember, you're doing great in history because no one hates history. They only hate how they've been taught history. All right, see you next time.